Welcome everyone to the DynamicsCon session, and I would like to start with a very big thank you for inviting me as a speaker. It's going to be a great event, lots of sessions. I'm really excited and that I'm allowed to present you something about Power BI. Alright, what are we going to talk about? I'm going to try to see if I can help you on the way on how to create stunning Power BI reports using the standard out-of-the-box Business Central APIs. What's the big idea of this session? I've done lots of Power BI sessions, but usually for developers, where I start to explain that you need to open the development environment, create an app, create APIs and consume them. However, Business Central has a lot of these APIs inside out of the box that we can also use to create really good reports. And these APIs are mostly forgotten. So my goal is to introduce you to those APIs. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Steven Renders. I'm from Belgium. And I'm an MVP, a trainer, a consultant. I work for a company called Platan. And there I specialize mostly in, let's say, development, reporting, and Power BI. So Power BI is my passion. All right. So let's dive into the content. And the first thing I would like to start with is that if you have already used Power BI before, or if you haven't used it before, well, inside Power BI, if you would like to connect to Business Central, there is the Business Central connector. And recently, 1 or 2 versions ago, Microsoft changed that connector and they introduced the possibility to be able to use the new standard out-of-the-box APIs. In the beginning, I wasn't really so, let's say, impressed with that announcement, because in the past we also had out-of-the-box web services and they were kind of, as I usually say, suboptimal. Not really interesting to use because they didn't really contain the information that we need. However, the APIs are simply amazing and we can do a lot with those. So my goal is to introduce you to them. There are different versions, but all of these versions of these APIs we should be able to use. One side note I need to make is that currently these APIs are only available when we're using Business Central SaaS. That means in the cloud. If you are using Business Central on premises, then the Power BI connector is not able yet to connect to these APIs. However, we can still create custom APIs. So all of the content of this session is mainly meant what you can do right now when you're using Business Central SaaS. All right. So when we are going to use Power BI Desktop and connect using the Power BI connector for Business Central, which I will also demo in a few seconds, we're going to see that we can connect and we can see the new APIs. Actually, let me demo that right now. So first demo, I'm going to start my Power BI Desktop. It usually takes a few seconds to open. Almost here. And once Power BI is open, I'm going to use the Get Data button to import some data in Power BI Desktop. And as we all know, with Power BI Desktop, we can import from a whole range of sources, and Business Central is only one of those. All right. So the first thing I do is I click on the Get Data button, and there I will go and select the More option, and because the Power BI connector is hidden behind that little More option, and it then opens a pop-up window. That also usually takes a few seconds, so I will see if that has... when it opens, sometimes it goes really fast and sometimes it takes a few seconds. Well, here it is. Here we can connect to a whole range of different sources, but this is the one I'm talking about, Business Central, and this one will connect to Business Central SaaS. And there is another one right below that we can use if you would like to connect to BC on-prem, but that one doesn't support the APIs yet. Microsoft has said that they will try to also make that available in one of the next releases. All right, so I'm going to use the Business Central connector here. And the system is then going to connect to my Business Central environment. Now, the first time that you do that, you will be asked to authenticate by typing in your email and password. The next time it's going to remember those credentials and is going to simply connect to Business Central, which is what he is doing actually right now. The navigator opens and shows me a list of all of the environments I have access to. Currently in that Business Central tenant, there are two environments, production and sandbox. It doesn't really matter which one that you use, production or sandbox, depends where the data is. Usually when I develop a report, I will go to the sandbox, and once all of that is ready and tested, I'm going to change it or move it to production. When we open an environment, then Power BI is going to ask Business Central, hey, what are the companies in there and where is the data in those companies? So he's trying to open the sandbox and provide me with a list of the companies that I have available in Business Central. Usually it goes quite fast. No, it's taking a little bit more time, but you have to keep in mind that the Business Central environment that I'm using is a free environment. It's a trial environment, and those might not always have the best performance, but normally it goes pretty quickly. So in a few seconds that sandbox should open, and then I should be presented with all of the companies I have access to, and then I'm going to open one of these companies, and in there I should be able to see the APIs, the web services, everything I am able to connect to. Alright, what we see now is that the sandbox has opened. I can see my companies in here. I'm going to open my Kronos demonstration company, and what we can see is that we still have these web services that we used to have in the past. I can expand them, and they are in the web services folder, which has been renamed to legacy. Does that mean it's going to disappear? Who knows? It might in the future. But anyway, in these web services, the default out-of-the-box ones weren't really that interesting. To give you a small example, if you select the Power BI customer list web service, you expect to see a list of customers, but if you zoom in a little bit, you will notice that the same customer is repeated a lot of times. So it's actually not really a list of customers, but a list of customer ledger entries. Not so amazing, suboptimal, as I usually say. Well, now what you can see is that you can also connect to the standard APIs, and these are the ones we get from Microsoft out of the box. And besides that, there are also advanced APIs where you can find the APIs that you create yourself. But today we're mainly going to use all of these standard APIs. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of them, and they have been put in here alphabetically. So if I'm looking for something which is customer related, I can very easily filter that, and I can see my customers in here. And if I then select the customers, we will see every customer only once, and a lot more interesting columns and also related tables that we can import. So that's a lot better than what we had before. So what we get access to out of the box are all of the APIs that Microsoft has created. Right now that's version 2.0. In the past it was version 1.0. In the future it might become version 3.0 or something else. And that's also very interesting. With these APIs you can version them. And when you build a report based on old APIs, it will continue to work, and even if Microsoft increases the version of those APIs and creates new ones, which was not usually the case with the web services. So it's fully backwards compatible, which is really great. So you have heard me mention the word APIs probably a couple of times, and that means that all of this is based on Business Central APIs. And these APIs are usually based either on pages or queries. If I create new APIs myself, I'm usually going to go for a query, but most of the Microsoft APIs, I think, are based on pages, which are also really good, and they also have some advantages that I'm also going to talk about later. So what you need to remember is, okay, they're based on query objects and page objects, like the customer list page, the item list page, and so on. All right, if you would like to know which APIs there are and you can connect to, well, it's not 1 or 2 APIs, it's not 5 or 6 APIs, it's a lot of APIs. Here, and using this link, when you go to Docs, you can see an overview of all of these APIs. You can expand the documentation, dive into it. You will be able to see all of the APIs here. Remember, they aren't really tables, they are pages, but okay, the customer API goes to the customer table. It's a page, which is the interface to the table. A lot of these APIs are in here, and you can say we have APIs for almost all of the master data, and also the transactional data. It might be posted transactions like ledger entries and posted documents, but also the non-posted transactions like sales orders, purchase lines, warehouse documents, and so on. So really good. And in the future, I'm also expecting a lot of new APIs to be created. So how can we connect to these APIs? Well, this demo I have already given you a few seconds ago. You open Power BI Desktop, you use the Business Central connector, you open the environment, the company, and then you get a list of all of the APIs that you can use out of the box. So let me quickly go back to Power BI, which I had already open here, and you can see these APIs. You can still consult the old ones. Voila. Now I'm not going to use these APIs. In a few moments I'm going to show you some other demos on how you can consume these APIs, but in a much more interesting way. And for that I have my second demo. And what I would like to have a look at is how to create an order intake report. Now, one moment. I have to go back one slide. Before we dive into that order intake report, there are basically 2 ways on how I can create it. I can create it from scratch, or I can say, well, whenever you create a new report, there are a few things you're always going to do again and again and again and again, like connecting to Business Central, filtering out the APIs you would like to use. Well, what did I do? I created a template that I'm going to share with you. You can find it on my GitHub. This is the link. Feel free to download it. Feel free to use it. And what is this API basically going to do? Well, if you open that Power BI template, what you will get is Power BI Desktop that will start. I've just clicked on the template. And Power BI Desktop is then going to ask you for your credentials that you use to connect to your Business Central tenants. In my case, he won't, because I have already done this before and he has cached my credentials. So he knows which environment to connect to. Then he will connect to that Business Central tenant and propose you a list of all of the environments in there. So right now he is communicating with Business Central, and Power BI is telling me, well, Steven, you have 2 tenants that you can go to, the production tenant or the sandbox. Then you simply say which tenant you would like to connect to. I have 2, it might also be 3 or 4, depending on how many tenants that you have, how many environments. And that's it. It's going to connect to that. If you see an Apply Changes button, you might need to click on it. That's it. Which means it's going to already preload some data in the data model. But in the end, in this report, we will not really going to see a lot of data. Nothing will be loaded. So click on the Apply Changes, and once the data is being loaded, then I can have a look at the queries I have available. To do that, I'm simply going to go to the data transformation or Power Query, and then you can see what I have done. Basically, I have used a query, which is going to query Business Central, and Business Central will respond, okay, what are all of the environments that you can connect to. And this I'm going to basically store in a parameter, which I'm then going to use to go to Business Central and provide me a list of all of the available APIs, which is now refreshing, and you can see them in a couple of seconds. Now, what we see right here are all of the out-of-the-box standard APIs, the ones I'm going to use in demo today, but also the web services and some advanced APIs. And the idea is that you never have to do all of this work again and again over again. You basically, if you would like to, for example, import some customers, you reference this query by doing a right click, which means it's going to create a copy of the original APIs that you can then very easily filter, for example, on the API or the data that you are interested in. And I'm going to go for customers. Voila. So I'm going to be left over with only one of these APIs, but because I have two companies, I'm going to see all of my customers per company. So this is actually a template in which you can see the environment, but it's also multi-company. If you don't want it to be multi-company, you can filter on the company of interest. Then I'm going to simply hit the expand button, and is then going to propose all of the columns I have available from the, let's say, customer API. The data will be pulled from Business Central, and here I see all of my customers coming in for every company I have in Business Central. I can see all of the interesting fields, number, name, and so on and so on. So a lot of information, much more than the old legacy web services. But on top of that, if we scroll a little bit further to the right, you might know that a customer has a country, a customer has a region, a customer has a payment term, a shipment method. Because the customer table in Business Central is related to the other tables. Well, these table relations are also included in these APIs. So that's amazing. I don't need to create any new API to also get my hands on the payment terms or any other information related to customers. So if I would like to see the payment terms, I can simply expand them. I will get the information from the payment terms table linked to the customer table. Right now I'm bringing in all of the columns, but you can then filter out the columns that you really don't need or are not interested in. So voila, now I have the payment terms of each of these customers. If I also would like to see something else like the payment methods or the shipment methods, I can also very simply pull them in the same query. Voila, so I have my customers and all of the other related information that I am interested in. Voila, so going to show me these shipment methods, and this I'm doing on purpose. Sometimes an error is by mistake, but here it's on purpose. I don't know why this happens, but sometimes if you open a certain related table, you might get an error. Meaning you have to go there another way, and it's very difficult to predict which of these will give an error or not, but okay. Apparently I can't see the shipment methods right now, so I can very simply undo that last step. Voila. That's it. And this way you can also get your hands on a lot of other interesting information by simply re-referencing this query and then going for the items and the sales orders and whatever I'm basically interested in. When ready, you then pull, download, close and apply the information and you work with it. But you never have to worry again on connecting to Business Central, changing the query into a multi-company, multi-environment query. All of that is in the template. Feel free to download it from my GitHub. I'm giving this away for everyone who's attending this session. So now that we know that, we can use that template to create a lot of reports. And I have a couple of reports I'm going to have a look at that I created based on the standard Microsoft APIs. We have an order intake report, we have an item availability report, then I have some other nice things to know, and depending on if I have time enough, there is also a financial report that I created. But first, let's have a look at an order intake report. I have already prepared it, so I'm going to open it. But because that sometimes takes some time, I have a few seconds now to explain what the report is all about. Imagine that you would like to see an overview of the order intake. Then the first thing, of course, you need to know is what is order intake, and I tried to keep it simple. And I consider the order intake everything which is in the sales pipeline of Business Central, all of the orders that are ready to ship or that might have been planned to be shipped in the future, but that are not invoiced yet. So there are transactions, they're not yet posted, but we sometimes would like to keep an eye on that, what do we have in the pipeline waiting to be shipped. Voilà, that's the order intake. The report is opening. Keep in mind I'm working with the Cronus demo data. I don't have that many orders and customers and items in there, but still it gives a very good overview on what is possible. At the right side we can see my tables coming in. I have customers, I have items, and then of course I have the sales orders, the order intake I am interested in. And I've tried to visualize this via a few visuals which are currently loading. In a few seconds, voila, they should be loaded. And I can very easily see, okay, I have a few orders that will be shipped in May and June. I can see it here amount-wise, quantity-wise. I can see where it will be shipped to. I have a very nice overview on a map, and I have one here in the matrix. I can filter this on company, on year, month, whatever I would like to filter on basically. Now, how did I create this report? Well, it's a very simple one. It's based on 3 tables. I have pulled in the sales order information, and then because on the sales order I'm mainly interested in items, I'm also linking that to the item table to see some more information about the items themselves and the customers that I'm shipping to. And besides that, I've also created a date table. Now, how did I create this report? Well, I basically used my template I talked about a few minutes ago. And from that template, I've pulled in the sales orders, the items, and the customers, and that's it. So I referenced my APIs query. I then had a look at the sales orders. Basically, I was interested in the sales lines, and that could be something important to know. When we look at the available APIs, you're going to see sales orders in there, but there's another API that has the name sales lines. Well, the idea is not to select the sales lines directly. That will produce an error because the sales lines API expects the document number, the number of the header. But what am I going to do? I have imported the sales orders, and in the sales orders there's also a relationship to the lines, and I can very simply then expand those lines and also import them. So to be able to see the sales orders and the sales lines, you only need to access one API, the sales order API, and from there you will also be able to see those lines. The data is loading. Normally this should happen in a few seconds. But let's wait a few seconds until we see that data then. Now, besides the sales orders, while we are waiting, I have also imported my customers and items. I could have also imported a lot more, but let's not worry too much about that. In the advanced editor, you can see what I have done as kind of a summary. And I can also show that here with these steps. It would be nicer if the data is there, but it's still loading. So I basically fetched in the sales orders from which I expanded the sales lines. I removed the columns I didn't want anymore. I also filtered this on line type item because I'm only interested in items, and then I added a few columns in here, and you can see that here in the summary. And basically I've done the same thing or something very similar also for my customers and items. All right, now we see the data is loaded and I have my sales order. So what did I do? I filtered the APIs on the sales order query. I expanded the data. Then in this data, there was also a column with the sales order lines, a little bit here more to the right. I expanded the lines, then I removed all the columns that I wasn't really interested in, and I filtered it to only see items. So from the header, I have some information about the customer and the date of the order, and all the rest is coming from the lines. Now, what did I also do? Well, because my template, the All API template, provides you the data for all of the companies and possibly also multiple environments. If I'm going to pull in sales orders and later I would like to make a link between the sales order and the customer, and the sales order and the item, that means that I should not use the customer number from the header to link it to the customer table, because there is data from multiple companies in there. So what did I basically do? I added 2 custom fields to the sales order table, a customer key field and an item key field. So what did I basically create? A customer key with the customer number preceded by the company and the environment. That's to make it a unique field. I've done exactly the same thing with the item. So in the sales orders, I have created 2 new fields, customer key, item key, and then I pulled the customer information, I pulled the item information, and in those tables at the end, I also simply added the same key. So the combination of the environment, a dash sign, the company, a dash sign, and then the item number. Voila. That's it. That's all that I have done here. Then I simply load the data into the data model, and I can very easily then create the relationships. And you see, to be able to go to the item table, I'm using the item key, and to go to the customer table, I'm using the customer key. I'm only using these fields in the relationship. So voila, that's it. And then I created some visualizations. Very nice to do so. Okay, that's a very simple demo using some information to create an order intake report. I also have another more interesting demo, which is basically about item availability. So I'm going to reuse the same APIs, but this time I'm more interested in looking on items and inventory. By the way, I'm also going to share all of these reports and how I create them on my blog and also on my GitHub. Don't worry about that. You are free to also download that information from there and maybe even enhance it. So the idea was, could I maybe create a report with some information about the items? And I wasn't really only interested in the inventory of the items, but what do I have available to sell? And there is a big difference sometimes between what we call inventory and what we call availability. Inventory is what we have physically in the warehouse, physically in stock, but it doesn't mean that if I have 10 bicycles on inventory, that I have 10 bicycles available to sell. No, there might already be 2 of them on a sales order, and maybe I have already 5 of them on a purchase order. So it's basically 10 minus 2 plus 5 that I have available to sell at a certain moment. And that's the information that I'm actually showing here in this report. I'm already also going to open the Power Query editor and refresh that. So in a few months, we can also have a look at that data. And then I don't have to wait on all of that. So while that data is being loaded, we can go in and look again at the report. So here I'm visualizing very simply all of the items. I can see the difference between what I have physically on stock and what I have available to sell. Very nice. I can filter this on a specific month, year. I can even go on a day level. I can very easily also see that I have some negative inventory and also availability. Now, why is this important? Well, it's nice to know that we can visualize that data, but in this report, I have also created a few measures, which I can see that there are currently 3 items that have a negative availability and also 3 items with a negative inventory. But it could be the case, and at a certain moment or on a certain day, that you have 0 items with a negative inventory, but maybe more than 0 items with a negative availability. So that's something you typically would like to know in advance so that you can buy or produce those items. So when will I not have enough stock for certain items? And all of that is very easy to create. Now, if you think about that, if you would like to create this type of report, what information do we basically need? Well, we need some information about items. Well, for items, there is an item query that I can use. There is the item API that I imported. There are quite a lot of columns in there, but basically I have removed the columns that I wasn't really interested in to be left over with the number of the item, the description of the item, the inventory of the item, and then some other columns. And same here, I have also created that key, which is a unique value, item number, company name, environment name, so I can link it later to other tables. Now this gives me all of the information I need about the inventory at a certain date, but not really at a certain date, it's the inventory of the items. The item ledger entries provide me with the information on inventory on a certain date. So I also imported the item ledger entries. I can see all of the documents that created the ledger entries. Then to be able to calculate the availability, I need to know what is on purchase at a certain moment. So then I imported the purchase lines. And on top of that, I've also imported the sales line. So besides the purchase orders, I've also imported the sales orders. So there is the purchase orders API. I can also pull the lines from that. There was the sales orders API, and I can also pull the lines of that. And from this purchase and the sales lines, I have the quantity on sales and the quantity on purchase. Now, then I decided that I did not want to load these three tables in Power BI, but I wanted to merge them into one table that gives me all of the facts. So one table with the inventory, quantity on purchase, and quantity on sale. Well, that's something you can very easily do in Power Query by merging or appending these queries. I appended the queries because they had the same columns, which means I'm left over with one fact table with all of the inventory information, but with also whatever is on sales and in purchase. It doesn't really matter that it's three tables that I am appending. Basically, when I'm going to import this into my data model, everything will be in my fact table, and in the fact table I can typically create some sums. So the fact table in my case is the combination of the item ledger entries, the sales orders, and the purchase orders. I also imported the item table to get some more information on the item details and a date. And the date I usually almost always create using a small script, which is also shared, no problem. Using this little DAX script, I create that date table, in this case based on the date I have in the fact table. The date is typically the posting date of the ledger entries, the shipment date of the sales lines, and the expected receipt date of the purchase orders. Well, based on that, I can then create a few measures to do some calculations. What is the inventory? Well, the inventory is basically the sum of the inventory column in the fact table, which is typically coming then from the ledger entries. The availability is the inventory minus whatever I have on sales plus what I have on purchase, and that's also in the fact table. Voila, so I have my inventory, I have my availability, and then based on that I can do a count. How many items are there where the inventory is smaller than 0? How many items are there where the availability is smaller than 0? Voila, two very interesting measures. And once you have all of that information, it's a matter of clicky, draggy, droppy, and visualizing all of that. And again, I created this based on the APIs. Voila, so two nice demos. I can give you five more demos, but just to show you that we have all of that information available out of the box. Now, most of the standard APIs are using pages. If I create my own APIs, I typically use queries. Why? Well, both of them are pretty good. The advantage of using queries is that you can much easier merge tables. You can also do that with pages. Now, I asked that question a long time ago at Kenny from Microsoft, and I asked, okay, what is better for Power BI, page APIs or query APIs? And basically Kenny said, well, for master data, page APIs might be a little faster because they're cached on the server. For transactional data, queries might be more interesting because they can aggregate data doing a group by. So that's simply a slide for your information. Multi-company is possible, as you can see, if you use my template. So that's also a possible multi-company. You can even make it multi-environment, but always keep in mind performance. The more data that you're going to pull in, the slower the report might become. What else can we do with these APIs? Well, what I've noticed, and I'm also going to share that report, is that when you pull data from a master table, customer, item, vendor, and many other of those master tables, is that there is also a picture field in there. Now, in the web services, I was never able to import that picture of the customer, that picture of the item. However, with the APIs, I was. So that's yet another amazing thing about those APIs. We can now, for example, also import these pictures, and I have a simple demo report to prove that. So what did I do? Normally in a few seconds this should load, and I have two tabs in here, two reports, one about customers, one about items, and the one of customers has the customer pictures, and the one about the items has the item pictures. Data is being imported. In a few seconds it should be here. Alright, what we can see right here are the item pictures from the Cronus demo database. And if I go to customers, I can also see the customer pictures coming in as they are available in that Cronus demo database. How did I do that? Well, no magic, nothing in my sleeves. I'm not a magician. It's all available out of the box in the APIs. Basically, if you import customers items, there's going to be a picture column in there, and that's the one that you need. What you will notice is that that picture is in the API as binary data, and you cannot simply import it. You need to transform it so that Power BI can render it as a picture. So, and there is the picture column, which is binary data. That's not the one that I'm loading. I'm going to convert this into a new column where I will convert that picture into a text. Now, it's a very simple transformation you can do in Power Query. And what you need to do is you need to convert the picture to a text 64 base string. And you need to precede it with the content type, which you also get from the API. So there is basically the picture, the content type, converted to base 64 string, and voila, you get the picture as a text. That's all that you need to do. Once you do that, you pull the data in Power BI, you wait a few seconds, and before you can really render it in a visual, there is one last thing that you need to do. That picture column, which is the image converted to text, you need to provide a data category. You say, okay, image URL, and that's it. With this extra property enabled on the two pictures, you can then very simply use that field and put it into a table, a matrix, or any other visual that supports it, and it will then be rendered. Amazing, right? There's only one limitation. The pictures are sometimes a little bit cropped, as you can see, and that's because of a limitation in Power BI Desktop. It's only able to load, I think, 65,000 characters. So if you have a bigger picture, you will not be able to render that completely. But still, that's really amazing. Voilà, these were some demos I wanted to show you. I have a few minutes left. So is there anything else interesting that I can tell about these APIs? Yes. Besides the standard APIs, there are some advanced out-of-the-box APIs from Microsoft that you can use. I haven't really taken the time to investigate in that a lot, but I'm sure there is a lot of interesting information in there. For example, you can connect to the admin center. You can see sessions, who's logged in. It should also be possible to connect to the job queue and see is there any job in the job queue that might be failing, and then pull that into Power BI, create a Power BI alert, and voila, you will get an alert whenever a job might be failing. So that's also something I'm going to try to invest some time in, and maybe also share some demo reports about that. One thing I'm also hoping for that's towards the future is that Microsoft might also enable this in data flows. With Power BI, we import data directly from Business Central. The disadvantage of doing that is that if I have to create 10 Power BI reports, and all of these 10 Power BI reports need customer information, and I'm going to be pulling the customer table and copying the data over to those 10 reports. If I'm then going to schedule the refresh of these reports, it might take a long time. And I will be refreshing the same data over and over and over again. And everyone that uses those reports needs access to Business Central to be able to access the data. Well, with the data flow, you can import that data in a database once, and then Power BI can connect to it. But at this moment, data flows do not support the APIs yet out of the box. The advantages, if they would support that, would be you only need to pull the data once from Business Central. You can implement security on data flow. You can give someone access to the data flow, and that person might not even have access to Business Central. So we can share that, secure that outside Business Central. You can do the refresh of the data only once. Your customers only need to be synced once to the data flow and can be reused in all of the Power BI reports. You can even do the refresh incrementally because data flows also supports that. So if you are as enthusiastic as me about data flows in combination with the APIs and you would like the APIs to support that, I can only suggest to vote on these IDs. If you go to aka.ms/bcids, you go to the ID list of Business Central. And if you vote for these two IDs, I would be really grateful. This is the ID to include the API or the Power BI Business Central connector and data flows. So we can do all of that amazing stuff, but also then in data flows. And this is the ID to also enable incremental refresh possibilities on that. So go there, click on the link, vote, vote, vote. I would be really grateful. I've seen in the meantime that the status of this ID changed to will be created in development. But still, it can help to vote because apparently it's taking a little time for Microsoft to really release that. But that would be, let's say, the cherry on the cake. Voila. These were the topics I wanted to talk about today in this short 40-minute session. I think I was able to squeeze in everything I wanted to talk about. So what do we need to remember? The Power BI Business Central connector supports APIs, and with these APIs we can create a lot of interesting reports. We have all of the master data, transactional data, and related tables available. One thing we might not have available are custom fields. Imagine that you have created a shoe size field on the customer table. Well, that's not a standard field, so you will also not have that field in your standard APIs. In that case, you might still want to create custom APIs. But besides that, the APIs Microsoft has created, the standard APIs, are really, really good. So you only now need to create custom APIs for the small amount of data or fields that might not be available in the standard APIs. So I hope that you found this session really interesting, and I also hope I might have triggered a lot of questions. So if you would like to ask these questions, no worries, there is a Q&A right after in a couple of moments, so feel free to ask me all of these questions in the Q&A, and I will be really happy to answer them. Besides that, I also would like to express my thanks to the DynamicsCon organization for having invited me to host this session. It was a real honor, so a very big thank you. And see you soon in the Q&A. All right, welcome everyone. I think I'm live on the Q&A now, which is great. During the session, I already noticed a few questions coming in. Most of them I think I might have already answered. Some information about where we can find some demos on my GitHub and then also on my blog. The multi-company or consolidation question that can be
fixed by using the template when you, for example, import data from multiple companies and multiple environments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I think, with the last question that came in regarding performance, or the almost last question, which is important. So how can you get the performance of those reports good? And the answer to that question is very simply, don't import too much. The more data that you will import, the slower the report might be, or the longer the refresh could take. So basically, it means that when you use standard APIs, then you might want to in Power Query filter the data. If you create custom APIs, then you might want to aggregate the data. And when you create a query object, you can join tables. You can also do a group by. You can pre-calculate some sums and then only import the aggregated data. Because in Power BI, even if you import a very big data set and you show it in a matrix visual, you're going to compress that anyway. So you could also compress that at the source, and then don't import any queries. Don't import any columns. You don't need less is more. And basically, in your Power BI report, you should have, I think, a maximum of about 10 tables, and every table 5 to 10 fields. That's it. If you're going to import more tables, if you're going to have more fields in these tables, users will be too confused and won't really know how to use them. And that's the most difficult thing. To create a good Power BI report, you need to create a very good data set and make the selection of which fields you're going to keep. And that would be my recommendation. Now, on my blog, I also have a few other recommendations on what you can do with performance. Then something else which is also interesting is that performance-wise, instead of loading all of the data in a different report, like I said in my session, could be interesting to work with a data flow. And that means that you could load the data in the data flow. Only the data flow would then refresh towards Business Central using a refresh schedule. And then the Power BI reports will go to the data flow, and they don't need to refresh data from Business Central, which means it's better for performance. However, at this moment, I think Dataflow has no connector yet for Business Central. It can only use either REST APIs via an API connector or the OData web services. But I think the Business Central team has that in the pipeline and should be released really soon. Then the other question I see, I think I have about 1 minute left, 1 or 2 minutes, is how to transform information from a blob field. I haven't really tried that yet, to be honest. So the pictures typically come either from blobs or media sets, and we can the API expose them, so we can import those in Power BI. Blobs I haven't really tried yet. It could be possible if there's a text file in a blob that we can import it in a similar way in Power BI. But it's also recommended to not store text and files in the Business Central database, but to store them, for example, somewhere else on OneDrive. And that you can do. So if you have some URLs of where files are stored, you can import URLs, make them clickable in the report. If these URLs link to images, there are even visuals that can visualize then the images linked to the URLs. So there are some possibilities there. But really importing data which is in a blob, maybe theoretically it could be possible, but you will also have that 65K limitation, I think, which is in Power Query, which hopefully in the future they might remove. All right, I think that these were all the questions, unless I might have missed some. Okay, if you put those URIs for the IDs you wanted to vote in this chat, I'm sure plenty of us will vote. Yes, that's a good idea. I will put those in the chat. I have to look them up. What you can do is, if you go to this website, aka.ms/bcids, and then you can look for renders or Steven renders, you will find all of these great IDs to vote for. And then maybe later I'll put the more detailed list there too. Any gotchas people should know about using Power BI inside BC? Yes, basically I would say performance, especially if you go multi-company. What I see a lot of people doing is they import all of the ledger entries and don't compress them, don't group them, and then you will have long refreshes. So I would say develop then queries that group the data into a data set that you then need in Power BI, and don't import too much. But most of the gotchas, I think, will be performance. And take your time. DAX is there, Power Query is there to also help you, but it will also take time to master DAX, I think. And any other questions or examples you might want, send me a mail, steven.renders@thinkaboutit.be.